first step in setting up the cover feet is to make sure that the eccentric for the position of the separating disc is in the correct spot. So we'll just rotate the disc until the knife starts separating the stack of covers. So you can see right here it's starting to separate inside of this area. It's fully separated. We want to just move the cover back and forth to make sure it's not too tight or it's not too loose. So this feels good. After that, we can adjust the position of these gears. If this needed to be moved, we would take the lock bolt loose with the 5/8 wrench and then turn the adjustment screw with a flathead screwdriver. That would adjust this disc in and out to get the correct clearance. Once that clearance is set, we can move on to adjusting the backlash between these gears. We like to see about 3 to 5 thousandths backlash. So once you take these two bolts loose, 3/4 inch wrench in the back and 9/16 wrench in the front, you can move them around. So you want to position them so that you have just the right amount of clearance before you set the timing. If the gears are too tight, they'll wear out, and if they're too loose, you will have a lot of backlash and have problems when you change speeds. It'll take a little bit of guess and check because you have to move around both gears at the same time. I'm going to check everything, hold the gear in the back. Right now my gear in the back has no backlash, so it's too tight. Gear in the front feels good. I need to take it loose again and move it around. Every time you move the gears, it will affect the timing, so that's why it's important to do this first. Alright, so we have backlash on the back gear. Now I'm going to hold the back gear and move the middle gear. I have backlash in the middle gear. Now I'm going to hold the middle gear and move the drive gear, and we have backlash there. So all together it's going to add up. And if the backlash is too much, then you're going to have way too much out here at the disc. So the next step is to use a 3/16 Allen and loosen the clamp on the separating spindle. Once you take this loose, take it off. There's a very fine-toothed spline on this gear that you can use to adjust the timing. So we'll remove the gear. Be careful, there's a thrust washer underneath. Usually this is filled with oil. Very important to make sure that the two holes line up over top of the dowel pins. So if you lift it off and this is filled with oil, it'll lift up off those dowel pins. Next, you want to adjust the timing. So we can rotate this anywhere we want now. So we want to rotate the seamer so that the cap pusher is just a little bit into this pocket. So we're going forward. Moving the seamer forward. There's the beveled edge on that leading cap pusher. And we want that cover to fall right into that beveled edge as close as possible. So I have it sticking into the pocket just a little bit. So when I can put this lid in here and I can rotate this spindle and have it separate, and it'll go through and fall down, and that'll show you exactly where it releases. You'll hear it click at the bottom. So now it's down all the way, and you can see that it's very, very, very close to that leading cap pusher. It may be touching it just a little tiny bit in that beveled area, but if it's touching it too high up, it'll cause problems. On a high-speed machine, it's very important to get it as close to that as possible. So the next step is to put this gear back on without moving it. So you want to find the right combination between the spline and the teeth of the gear. So if it doesn't line up, just lift it off and rotate it around until you find that one little spot where it drops in. Just like that. So I dropped it down without rotating anything. After that, we want to set the height of the gear, the height of the spindle, sorry. So when we use this clamp, we will use this clamp to tighten it, and the tighter you make it, the more it will lift it. So when we go back down here, we want to rotate the seamer forward a little bit so that separating disc covers the cover. We want to use a feeler gauge. We want to measure the clearance in between the top of the cover and the bottom of the disc. So right now, I'm looking for about 15 thousandths gap. So we'll measure this clearance in here. Right now it's less than 15 thousandths. So I want to tighten the clamp at the top to bring the spindle up a little bit, which will pick up on the disc. Be careful too, because if you jam the feeler gauge in there, it'll force it up. So you want to just be gentle. Slide that in there. We've got maybe a little bit more than 15. So I can take it down, take this lock nut collar a little bit loose. Now it's tight. I'm going to go just a little bit up. There's 15 thousandths. So right there is where we want to set that. We'll use the 3/16 Allen. Tighten this nut. Tighten the bolt. That needs to be pretty tight so it doesn't move around. Okay, so that's tight. This is the bolt that prevents the spindle from moving up and down too far. Well, right now, it'll move up and down because there's nothing stopping it. So this bolt will stop it from moving. So we want to take the bolt loose. That way we know we can raise it up and have it ample room. So when we tighten the cover down, it doesn't jam up. We can use a flathead screwdriver on the other side to turn it. So now we're up plenty high, so when we tighten this cover down, it will not jam up on us. You guys have the gasket. Make sure to put the gasket on. Sometimes this gasket has to be trimmed in the back, so use a knife and trim the back where it meets the upper turret housing. Slide this top cover over the dowel pins. Nice and snug. There's 4 bolts that tighten this cover down. Make sure you put the fasteners in the correct spot. There's a 5/16 Allen wrench. Turn the socket head cap screws. Use a 9/16 wrench to turn the head cap screws. Now we want to adjust the vertical play on this spindle. Right now we have a lock, so we'll use a flathead screwdriver and turn that adjustment screw clockwise, tighten it, and that'll send the bolt down . They put sealants on that bolt, I can't turn it. Yep. So we just want to have a very small amount of vertical play, approximately 5 to 10 thousandths. 5 thousandths would be good. You don't want that bolt to be touching it to put pressure on it. You don't want it to move too much. So right now there's just a very small amount of movement, and once you get that, we'll tighten this lock nut. Double check that we have a little bit of movement, and once we do, then we can go ahead and we can put our NC shaft in. No can, no cover. We need to put our knife in at the same exact time. So the knife should have a brass plug on the end of the set screw so it protect the splines. So we'll line up the splines, slide the shaft through, and once at the top we'll put our screw in to hold the bearing down. That'll keep the shaft from moving. The vertical play on this is adjustable just not the play, the vertical position is adjustable by loosening the set screw on the side. So we want to use 15 thousandths feeler gauge again and adjust the clearance between the top of the separating disc and the bottom of the knife. So once that is set, you can tighten the set screw. Five 30-seconds Allen wrench. That feels pretty good. So now we have a couple thousandths movement here, up and down, and we have 15 thousandths clearance in between. So when this moves up and down, if it ever does, they won't contact each other. Now we can go back up to the top and we can put the arm on for the air solenoid. We need a 7/16 wrench. You can tighten this bolt. It's important to have air on the solenoid so that it's pushing it in the correct direction. When it's closed, you want it to stick out just a little bit, and then we'll tighten the hex head bolt with a 7/16 wrench, and then we can test its function by making sure that it goes back when it's opened beyond that back guide. We don't want it rubbing on the center of the spindle shaft. Goes back, goes forward, it'll stop the covers from sliding through. It's important to check this back guide to make sure that we have proper clearance when the stack of covers is in there. So once we have all the covers in, we'll use a feeler gauge. We'll measure the clearance in between the cover and this back guide. And we'll check to make sure that we have approximately 20-25 thousandths throughout. Another thing to check too is to make sure that the height of the back guide is at the correct height. So we don't want it to, the cover to get underneath that. So it doesn't look like it will here. This knife will come out and it'll stop it. So that looks good. If it needs to go up and down, you just take these screws loose and adjust accordingly. Use the shims to adjust the clearance in between here. So that looks a little bit bigger than normal. Always make sure you put oil in the fill plug. Take the fill plug loose. fill the oil. Fill with Seamer gear oil until you're halfway up the sight glass, which would be about this high. We're halfway up the gears. Where's the airline at? The airline goes in over on this side. It's right there.
A hole in the bottom of the box? There's a hole in the bottom of the box.
Airline goes on the cylinder, solenoid.
Rolling with a cover, we're done.
Fill the oil, put the cover on. Okay.